Like, I love the toilet. Growing in the ground because, like you say, if you're renting, I live in a shotgun house, so like there's not too much of actual grassy area to put things in the ground. So I do a lot of container planting, whether that be actual plastic containers. They also have like grow bags, like these that are cloth that you can use. And they come in all different sizes too. Like this is a big one. I think this one is 20 gallons, but they make these in 5, 10, 15-gallon bags. Um, and they drain the water well. They're really good. You can grow anything you want in them. You can even put trellises inside of them if you put the dirt up high enough. But container gardening is a perfect way to start if you don't actually have a lot of space to plant into the ground. But when you're doing container gardening, your soil is very important because you're not getting the nutrients straight out of the ground anymore. You have to put everything into your pot. So if you're using a good dirt, I like to use a compost mixed with dirt. And then usually I'll put a layer of compost on top every so often when I'm going around and checking on my plants. And that extra compost on top, it'll absorb those nutrients to the soil like through the bottom. So very good soil is important, and you can start in those containers, but don't limit yourself with containers. You don't have to go and use a regular pot that you found at Home Depot. You can grow out of anything. Like they're growing in a toilet up there. Did y'all see that when y'all walked in? Like you can use anything to grow in. It doesn't have to be your typical stuff that they sell at the plant store. And that's been really helpful for me too, because I don't always want to go and buy a new pot. They're not cheap, especially the good ones. So you can use whatever you want. When you're doing container gardening though, like I said, the soil is really important. So you want to make sure that you're either purchasing a soil that already is well mixed. There's a lot of, I won't say a lot, actually I've got one person where I get my dirt from. But you can mix your dirt up, mix it with a good compost, mix it with a dirt mix. Some people can put peat in there or some sand if you want, depending on where you're growing. And that's why it's good to know what you're growing, because certain vegetables require more drainage. Some vegetables, they like it to be really moist, so you can keep all of that in there. And some vegetables can handle a little bit of dry, but not much, honestly, because they all pretty much like the water. But it's important to know what you're growing because you have to adjust that environment inside of your pot for that specific plant, vegetable, fruit, whatever. Also, I want to say don't be discouraged about growing fruit or having fruit trees if you are in a small environment. I always say that whenever I move that I'm taking all my trees with me. It's because I'm not putting them in the ground. Even if it's a larger size tree, you can put it in a big trash can. Like, just don't limit yourself. You can have a little lemon tree or something back there inside of a very large trash can, and you wheel it out with you whenever you leave and set it back up somewhere else wherever you are. Like, that is an option. You don't have to put everything in the ground. I skipped around here and started with the container gardening. But yeah, I'm not hard on myself, so I'm not worried about that. I also do want to say, if you are going to do container gardening or if you're going to build a smaller bed, if you're going to use wood that you find somewhere else, like if you're not going to find a fresh piece of wood from the store, you always want to make sure that you're looking at where that wood came from and what was used in that wood. Because a lot of times with pallet boards and stuff like that, they'll be chemical treated, and if you put your plants inside of a box with wood that's chemical treated, then now you're going to absorb that in the plants and into you. So just make sure you look for something, if it's treated at all, to have heat treatment on it. It'll have an HT on it. You got to look close. It's usually spray painted and blurry and you can hardly see it. But if you look hard enough, usually you can tell it says HT, and that'll be your best wood to use if you're going to build something from recycled wood. Before I move on to a different section, do y'all have questions about container gardening in particular?
I have two questions. You talk a little bit about something that can hold the roots. Is there like a go-to reference for like this type of plant, this size, container in it? So that's the first question. Next would be, is there a general size container that you can like manage anything you want to plant, like gallon-wise or depth, or what I'm talking about?
The smallest, I'm going to go with your second question first because it's fresh on my mind. The smallest container I would use to grow like a vegetable or something in would probably be like, what's that, like a 5 or a 10 gallon? I wouldn't go anything smaller than that. You can start seeds in anything really small, but to grow something at least where you could put, like, my hands are small, but I would go like at least 2 of my hands that could fit inside of it so that you have enough space. Like a lot of times those tomatoes, I know they're tricky, but tomatoes don't actually require that much soil depth to grow. A lot of the vegetables and stuff that we grow surprisingly aren't rooted that deep in the ground. You have like your root vegetables like the beets and your carrots and stuff. Of course, that'll go down a little bit more, but a lot of stuff, honestly, it's not that deep. That's why I don't know if y'all ever notice some of those boxes that people build, they'll fill more than halfway up with a bunch of junk because your plants aren't gonna go way down there. Like the roots usually don't go that far. So I would say minimum size for a container, at least like a 10-gallon, to grow something that's gonna be coming up and out.
Is
Yeah.
there like a go-to reference to figure out, like if you want to be more specific for a plant, or you just Google it, or?
And you honestly Google, and I look at the back of the packets of whatever I'm starting. Usually I'm starting it from seed, and they'll tell you how much depth they usually need to be like planted into. And as long as you can have the roots can go at least like 5 to 10 inches down, then they should be okay. But again, it depends on exactly what you're growing because some stuff grows super shallow, and then some stuff it takes way deeper. So it helps to research exactly what you're growing to know how much depth it'll need. So yeah, I wouldn't shy away from Google either to make sure on the depth wise. But it doesn't have to be massive. I've seen people grow really healthy tomatoes in a 10-gallon bucket on their porch, and they get tomatoes. They just keep coming. You said, what was your first one? I'm sorry. Your
That
first
was the
question?
first one, just like if there was like a go-to like almanac type chart or something, but it sounds like Google is the
Yeah,
way to go.
just to see how deep everything is growing. Although I do have this experiment that I really want to do of growing something behind like some glass or something so I could actually see how deep everything is going, but I'll let y'all know how that goes once I get to that experiment. Thank you. Any more questions about the container gardening in particular?
When you put
What'd you say?
when you put the compost on top, bugs don't eat away at your stuff? Like at your
So when I'm saying compost, I'm like once it's already like the dirt and stuff like that. But I'm gonna be honest, you're gonna have bug problems with most things that you're growing. I'm still working on a good natural combination spray concoction to keep them away. But with the compost on top, I don't find that it makes it more buggy than usual. No.
So when I don't know if this goes for everything, but I was told because I ended up getting like spider mites on like a house plant, and I was told to prevent that you put like hay or sand on top. But would you do that?
I've never tried the sand on top before because it seems like it would be a little heavy, but I have done like the straw or the hay or even wood chips on top of the potted plants. I haven't done the sand one before, but I do sometimes cover the top of my pots with a little straw, like some pine straw, because I've got a ton of that laying around. But yeah, and that helps. It helps to hold the moisture in when you do it like that,
Okay.
so you don't have to water as frequently. But that's a big thing too with container gardening, and when you're growing particularly vegetables with container gardening, is that you have to have consistent watering with those things. Not necessarily overwatering because you don't want to drown anything, but consistent watering. Because if you notice, I call them stretch marks. Like when you get those tomatoes or like cucumbers and stuff and they have those white marks that come on them, a lot of times that's from inconsistent watering. So you just want to make sure you're consistently watering whatever it is that you're growing. Yes.
Can you talk about your layering method inside of the container? I know you said compost soil, but do you use any sticks or leaves or anything? Okay.
Yeah, I definitely do, especially when I'm planting in these big ones, because that takes a whole lot of soil to fill up. So if I'm planting in a big one like this, I've used old logs, I've used sticks, I've used... Someone was telling me a few weeks ago of actually certain types of plastics that you could put down there. I haven't tried that. I'm not saying to do it or that I recommend it, but I saw it somewhere that people were putting plastic at the bottom. I'm just not sure how that would go because, you know, when plastics eventually, if it ever decomposes, like that's chemicals and stuff. But wood for sure I've put down there. I've put pine needles and stuff down there. I've put random things that I have found around in the yard down there. Really anything that'll just fill the space in without me having to use the quality dirt and compost because that can get expensive filling the whole thing up. And then once the rest of that stuff starts to break down, it'll feed the plants once it's actually broken down. But a lot of times I'll use wood chips, pine needles. I've put cardboard pieces down there, old wood, Pretty much anything, honestly. Also, I've seen, I haven't done it personally yet because he's due for a fishing trip, but old fish pieces and stuff too, like you can put that in the bottom of your pot, like their bones and guts and stuff like that. It'll decompose and feed your plants. It's kind of gross, but it works. It's
I
a
have
good,
a friend that
good
swears
natural
by it.
fertilizer. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely amazing. Just put a little lime on top so it doesn't stink.
Yeah. Okay. Lime. I needed that.
Like ag lime, yeah.
You can do that
Okay.
with birds too.
But yeah, I'll put anything
Okay,
in there,
cool.
honestly.
Hmm.
Anything else about containers? And of course, we'll have more questions later on, just before I move to this next section. With the containers, though, if you're growing certain foods that require a trellis in most times, trellises from the store, like the nice metal ones, are not as cheap as you think. They've gone up, actually. They used to be a lot cheaper. So I'm good on that. I don't buy those from the store, but you can make your own. You can make your own trellises, whether that be out of wood. Like, oh, look, perfect. These would make a great trellis if you were to put those together. And there's different types of trellises that you can make. But when you're growing in a small space, if you can grow your food upward instead of outward, you'll save a lot more space.